Started. Good afternoon. This is Ifan from the Strategic Day Trader, and this is your market wrap for June 4th, 2020. Q's down zero point 0.7 there, SPY down 0.27. Came in today bullish on the market. We would have to get underneath this base that we had established over the last couple days to get some kind of trend break on the hourly. And so as you can see, we haven't got that. Okay. And I think it's important to keep that in perspective. Market is still in an uptrend on the daily, on the hourly, weekly is not rolling over. Q's still up near the newly made all-time highs here, and still in an uptrend, right? So, we could start to look for bearishness after we get underneath 232 on the Q's. That would be underneath this base on the SPY, 305, but we are not there yet, okay? And even then, we really have this pivot below. So I think it's a bit premature still, as I said yesterday, to really start talking about, the top is in or anything like that. I see it a lot. A lot of traders trying to guess the top here. I've seen it, basically for the last few weeks, pretty consistently, almost daily. My plan is to stick with the hourly. Now, I know I'm not going to be picking the top. I'm not going to be making any calls at the very, highest price that was the absolute top, right? But it's also allowing me to kind of stick with the trend and not constantly be guessing or hoping that my guess is right. Okay, so uptrend on the hourly, uptrend on the daily. We don't have a trend break. We don't have a confirmed downtrend even on the hourly, which would need to happen first before we get some kind of downtrend on the daily. That's barring any kind of massive event where we gap down and completely take out the daily uptrend. So barring that, which is pretty unlikely, but you never know. Barring that, I can only go off of what I see here on the chart, and the uptrend remains. So I would be bullish going into tomorrow. Okay, so let's get into today's plays. James went over the favorites with you this morning, right? And I want to go over, similar to yesterday, how we came to those to be the favorites and why it's important to know what the favorites are, because the plays set up and trigger at the open pretty quickly. So we tell you in the pre-market what the favorites are. The number one gap this morning was the KZR. Okay, now what makes this a top gap? What makes this a favorite for a long at the open, right? We have our criteria. We're looking for a gap that's on a gap up, breaking resistance, going against the short-term downtrend, going against the long-term trend, which was basically just sideways as of the last few weeks, as the last couple months, and then is gapping of its own accord, not because the market's gapping. Today, the market was gapping down. This was gapping up pretty significantly. I think it was about 51%. Okay. And then we don't want it to be gapping excessively above resistance. On this one, resistance was at 667, and this opened at 675. Perfect, right? Perfect spot to open there, right above the resistance, right? And so what we're looking for then is an entry. Now, you can't do all that stuff, well, some people can, I guess. You can't, but it's better you don't wait until the open to do all that analysis. You can check it out at the pre-market, get an idea of where it's going to be gapping, because you have all of 4 minutes to put your entry, right, and know what your stop is, okay? So it's not that it can't be done. 4 minutes for some traders is a really long time. But if you're looking at the KZR, you're looking at SMAR and the CLDR all at the same time, it's that much easier, and especially if you don't know which ones are your favorites, you're looking at a dozen other gaps to miss the entry, okay? And so I thought that today, in order to do well this morning, you really had to know what a high-quality gap entails. And I think yesterday was the same thing, okay? That is often the case. We're out of earnings season. The stuff that gaps, that stands out, gets a lot of attention right away. So you got to be ready to go. Okay, so this KZR had a breakout here. If you missed that one, I gave you numbers on this one, the KZR over 705. You can see again, we're still talking about the first 5 minutes of the open. So if you're not ready, if you don't know what this KZR looks like, if you don't already have it on a chart, right, then you're not going to be able to catch this thing, right? So that was a pretty nice move on the KZR. That was the number one gap, tier one gap on the KZR. Full points, okay, from gap rating standpoint. Okay, SMAR was the best gap down. Okay, gapping down. You can see again against the short-term trend, against the long-term trend, clearing support here. Okay, clearing support and not gapping because of the market. This was gapping of its own accord, much greater than the market. Market was a small gap down, right, and not excessive. Right, I got a question today. Well, this thing's gapping $9. Isn't that too much? $9 is not going to be the same for every stock, right? The important thing is that we're looking at where is support, okay? We're not talking about what the gap size is in absolute terms. If this only needed to gap to $50 and this actually opened 50 cents below, that's not excessive. This thing does $2 to $3 pretty commonly in a day's range. So 50 cents beyond the support is not an excessive gap. Now, if we're gapping maybe to 30 and we only need to gap to here or even to this support here, underneath this support, then yes, we could be talking about something that's pretty excessive, right? This was not excessive. Now again, if you're not ready for this on the SMAR at the open, right, then you're gonna miss it, right? Came in 1 minute high low, came in right away. This one gave you a little bit more time than the KZR to play this breakdown as well. But again, we're talking about the first 15 minutes or so at the open, right, to be ready to play this, right? And there's lots of other things that you could be looking at, okay? So that's why it's important that you're prepared at the open. That's also why we try to go over it with you in the pre-market. I know some people kind of show up sometimes later later in the morning and kind of ask what were the favorites or what are we supposed to be looking at, and in those situations, it's tougher. It's definitely tougher to kind of make something out of the day without the benefit of the the shock value of the gap and the additional volatility that you get at the open. I kept the CLDR on here. I don't think this ended up going anywhere. It did get sold a little bit, but this was behind the SMAR. Okay, so this was like tier number, or not, it's still like a tier 2, but it was like number 3 gap. Okay, so on this one, we do have shock value. It is gapping against the short-term trend. Okay, and so it does have some shock value. It's gapping against the long-term trend. Issue is it's still gapping into support. Okay, so we're gapping into this hourly base. Okay, so that's what set this one apart from the others. Notice how like the SMAR is leaving behind weeks of trading. The KZR is leaving behind months of trading. And then what about the CLDR? Really just a couple days. Really just, negating a couple days worth of trading. So, this one, as far as the impact on the chart, the potential that it's going to run, the larger time frame players being really shocked by this move, and you can see the difference. Here's the KZR. I mean, you look at this weekly chart, is this your eyes not drawn to this, right? That means something big is happening here on this weekly chart, and it's happening today, right? So on the CLDR, that was kind of the third gap. Maybe this run up, this extended run up, does get some follow through, and maybe it does so more in the days to come. But just as far as what we look for the best potential move at the open, this was number 3. And then we had a couple others that were maybe good to watch, and a few others that were just in case they set up. But really, that was the focus. So hopefully, if you weren't kind of doing your own preparation in the pre-market, then us going through them before the open also helped you to guide you and focus you. Okay, so really important to do the pre-market preparation. Know what you're looking for when it comes to the gaps, because you can find dozens of gaps a day, and as I'm sure you well know, they're not all created equal. Okay, all right, hope you did well today. We'll be back at it tomorrow to close out the week, and I will talk to you then. Have a good evening.